Mr. Schäffer, we speak in Ruse on the Bulgarian-Romanian border. You're an Austrian expert dealing with Danube region and from the Eastern Institute, which uses Danube region and Middle Europa or Central Europe. Austria had this important agreement with Bulgaria and Romania at the end of 2023, which allowed the countries to join the Schengen area, but it also had some other clauses, not only that they don't join by land borders through which the bulk of their trade with Schengen area passes, but they also, the border control on the Bulgarian-Romanian border should be strengthened. To what extent this agreement will continue a long time? Isn't it some kind of anomaly to strengthen European border, given that EU philosophy is generally to weaken the borders?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for meeting with me. It's a pleasure to be here with you in Ruse and speaking to you. You ask a very good question. I think it's known that my position on that air Schengen and sea Schengen accession is something that I believe is a dangerous development. Why? If we think about other European achievements like free movement of goods, free movement of people, etc., and will apply that logic that has been applied to Romania and Bulgaria when it comes to Schengen, we could assume that in the future, for instance, maybe we also limit travel for certain people. We limit access to the market for certain professions. Yeah? There's discussions about the farmers. So maybe in the future, with future accessions, we limit access to the single market for farmers because we set a precedent here with regards to Schengen that we have a situation that both countries, Romania and Bulgaria, fulfill the criteria that is set out for over a decade. And then, due to certain reasons, they are denied a full access. And this can set a very dangerous precedent for the future. Apart from the fact that I believe, as you said, the overall goal of European integration is dismantling borders. Right now, what we are doing is only shifting them. But this is not something only for Bulgaria and Romania. This is something that is true for the whole continent. So ultimately, as long as we will not have more or less every country joining the European Union and or having an agreement that would include them in Schengen, we just shift the borders, and in that case, yes, it's counterintuitive to the actual goal of European integration.
We saw that there is this proposal for elimination of border controls between Romania, Bulgaria and Greece, which in a way counters what Bulgaria and Romania agreed with Austria. That makes me ask you something more on that issue. Are there conflicting visions for our region's future, and how would you describe these visions as content?
Well, I think there are definitely different visions, and that is not necessarily a bad thing, because I mean the essence of democracy is to find compromise, discuss different ideas, and then find a solution ultimately. So it's, first of all, it's a good thing to have different ideas towards a challenge, I would say. But I don't see that you're referring to mini Schengen ideas, yeah, that have also been, for instance, issued for the Western Balkans. Yeah? And again, per se, this idea is nothing bad, because it contributes as a step which hopefully will lead to the next step, which would be full integration into Schengen. But again, there is a danger that I see. If we have partial solutions, there will be a development a potential development in European integration where it's not a Europe of different speeds, but it's a Europe of different circles, different clubs, maybe even. And with this, so we potentially develop in a direction that drives us further apart than it should unite us. And Schengen is about uniting, connecting people, abolishing border controls, enabling trade, exchange, etc.
Austria had a particularly tough position on migrants, and recently the EU adopted a migrant pact. You might not be specifically an expert on migration, but I'm certain you have some position maybe on philosophy or principles of this pact, which is criticized for putting emphasis maybe on economic migration, reducing the grounds for human rights or asylum protection as grounds for accepting migrants, and it also kind of introduces a kind of trade, if I may say, with migrants, given that countries who don't want migrants and can pay to others who accept them. What's your position on the migrant pact and the general tendency for EU policy towards migrants?
Well, as you rightly pointed out, I'm not an expert on migration, but I do have a certain opinion. Again, we have at least some progress. So this is, in principle, it's a good thing, I would say, because we have argued so long about how to deal with that challenge on a European level that I am very happy that we have achieved something. But of course, I also see, on the one hand, the potential undermining of the principles of humanitarian help and the right to asylum and etc. On the other hand, I think, I mean, what you mentioned as it's almost like you can pay to make your sins go away. Some sort of Ablasshandel, as we call it in German. When you committed a sin and then you donate to the church and then you are relieved of your sins. And this could be seen in such a way. But ultimately, I would spin it more positively, because if countries are not willing or able to accept migrants, at least there's some sort of burden sharing. And I think this is an important factor. This is something that we should stress much more on a European level, because the overall idea is to share burdens, to support weaker partners, and if someone is overwhelmed with something, the others will chip in to alleviate the situation. And therefore, if you pay to be then less receptive for migrants, but the others can use that money and will use that money to make integration better and give opportunities, why not?
As an expert, you have been very interested in EU reform. What particular policies or changes you advocate for or are interested or analyze?
Mm-hmm. So I've been talking a lot about the need to introduce qualified majority voting in basically every area. There's especially nowadays in the policy of the common foreign and security policy, but even more necessary in the field of enlargement. If we look at the current enlargement process, there are almost 80 possibilities to veto in that process. That comes from declaring a country as a candidate, opening negotiations, then opening chapters, provisionally closing chapters, and then closing the negotiations, etc. And here I also have to mention that, for instance, Bulgaria has been exploiting this towards North Macedonia. But also other member countries have done so before. Greece, again, towards North Macedonia, but also there has been France reluctant in the enlargement process in the past, the Netherlands, Germany, Austria, Denmark. So a lot of countries use the possibility of vetoes, and when it comes to, for instance, sanctions, we have seen how that is basically even used as some mechanism to blackmail or extort something from the side of Hungary when it comes to the sanctions towards Russia. And I think we need to, with all respect for national sovereignty, if you exploit your national sovereignty to stop progress on a European level, this needs to be abolished. And so one of the core things would be to introduce more qualified majority voting. You don't necessarily need a treaty reform for that. You could do that, but you need unanimity one time at least. A second thing that I think is we need a broader institutional reform. I think the European Parliament, it's the only democratically elected parliament where its members have not the possibility to initiate legislation. So we need a reform that the parliament can initiate legislation. And I'm also advocating for having not the Council of the European Union as a second chamber, but rather a Council of the European regions. I think we need a reflection of European regions that are represented in the lawmaking process, and not only as a consultative body as the Council of not the Council of the Region, but the Assembly of the regions is. And the third point would be something that we've been working on recently, also with my colleague from the University of Osnabrück, Ulrich Schneckener, is what we call the Greater European Council. So this would be, so to say, an upgrade to the proposed European political community. It would address exactly those countries that want to become a member, countries that have been a member, and countries that do not want to join. Bring them together, sit them around the table in the format before the European Council meets, and discuss the common challenges: security, climate change, transportation, science and knowledge transfer, technological possibilities and challenges. And if you are approaching membership of the European Union at a certain point, you just stay seated at the table when then the actual European Council meets. So on the one hand, you would bring more countries together, discuss in a broader format. Through this also, you would show maybe the possibilities of further integration, and you would also smooth the process from being a candidate country to becoming an actual member, and so to say bridge the time gap between now and when you will be joining the European Union, while at the same time giving countries that do not want to join, because it's legitimate, you don't have to join, nobody forces you to join the European Union, to stay out, but still meet in a format and discuss and work together.
You mentioned that countries which perhaps perceive themselves as weak or weaker in the European Union or smaller in influence are opposed to getting rid of their right to veto. How do you address their concerns, and how would, not maybe you, but how would this approach policy, which aims at reform, convince them to get rid of this veto, which maybe they now appreciate as um, subjectivity, right to act.
Yeah, well, I would say there is always a possibility to find some sort of minority regulation. Yeah, if you find a certain amount of smaller countries, for instance, that oppose a decision because they are afraid that within qualified majority voting, or the double majority that it is, that you have to have a majority of member countries, but also a majority of the population, which is in itself already guaranteeing to a certain extent that they are not outvoted. But you could introduce even stronger minority clauses that would help to alleviate these fears. The point will be to convince countries that they on their own cannot veto it. And I don't have a good approach towards that, because I see that national sovereignty is unfortunately still a very delicate and important issue to countries, which is not necessarily linked to a political spectrum in itself. But I believe that in situations where we need to make decisions and bring progress given to the big challenges of our time, that at a certain point countries should understand we are better off together. And if you look at the decisions taken in the Council of the European Union, the vast majority is taken unanimously anyways, even if qualified majority would be enough. So I think this should be the convincing approach, although I'm sure that there will others that still would oppose that, because it takes away their leverage.
We speak in the week in which Macedonians voted at the first round of their presidential elections, and there is a general feeling that perhaps Macedonia, or even maybe other countries, go or too much rely on sovereignist tendencies in their political spectrum. How is Austria seeing this difficulty to integrate the Western Balkans, this high level of conflicts between different countries there, and tendency for maybe not synchronization but going in your own way?
I think there is a broad understanding within the Austrian government that the future of the Western Balkans should be in the European Union. This is also why the Foreign Ministry is advocating for that staged accession approach, which would mean that if you progress to a certain extent, then you get additional benefits. You can get access to the overall EU budget. You could access the cohesion funds. You would have a possibility to maybe not immediately vote, but you would participate in the negotiations of the council and things like that. And I think this is a good sign that there's progress with this regard, because if you look at it, we have promised 2003 at the summit of Thessaloniki that the future of the Western Balkan countries will be in the EU if they fulfill the criteria. This promise can legally drink alcohol in the United States because it's 21 years old. And in this case, I think we really need to deliver. What I see as a challenge here, that we have new candidate countries, Moldova, Ukraine and Georgia, and if the situation arises that they are progressing faster than the Western Balkan countries, this could further alienate this region. There is a broad understanding, I think, also within the majority of the Austrian politicians that the Western Balkans is extremely important also from an economic point of view for Austria, but there's also an understanding that We are surrounding the Western Balkan countries. And how would you have, we treat it as a backyard, but it's actually the inner courtyard, because it's in the center. And Austria is an immediate neighbor. And I think we have to come back to the point where we understand that every enlargement round we have economically benefited. Not to the same extent, but there is not a single instance of EU enlargement where the old EU member countries have not economically benefited. But what we also must not forget, the majority of enlargement rounds were not out of economic reasons, but for democratic stability. 81 Greece, 86 Spain, Portugal, 1990 German reunification, 2004 the big Central and Eastern Europe enlargement, and then 2007 your country, Romania, and the last one, 2013, Croatia. And we should come back to that understanding and highlight not the challenges, but the potentials of enlargement.
Speaking about enlargement, you are very close to what is going on in Ukraine, and there is a general agreement that Ukraine should be helped to advance towards the European Union, but also there are also concerns maybe that Donald Trump could return to the White House. And how do you see the future of Ukraine's European accession in this dynamic international context in which maybe attitudes towards war in Ukraine potentially could change?
Well, this is a huge topic, of course. I just came back from Uzhhorod and Lviv. I was there last week, and contrary to a year ago, where I was in Kiev, I have the feeling that the overall situation takes a toll much bigger now on the Ukrainian population. The war drags out, it wears out these people. I mean, it's unbelievable how they, under which conditions they have to live. Constant threats of being bombarded with rockets, with drones, etc. This creates an environment that is very, very precautious for precarious for those people, and it takes a toll also mentally. I would see, and why I'm mentioning this is we would have the possibility to protect them if we would deliver more air defense weapons, but also give them the opportunity to defend themselves on the front lines. And this, of course, hinges a lot on the support from the United States. Now, we've had this aid package being signed off by President Biden just, I think, a couple of days ago. And this will come, but there might also be an occasion, as you mentioned, if Trump comes back, maybe there's not a next aid package. And what would that mean? Also with regards to the European integration of Ukraine. Very simply put in terms, there's Article 42.7 in the Treaty of Lisbon that states if a EU member country is attacked, other EU member countries use all means at their disposal to defend that country. We cannot guarantee this as a European Union without having NATO and without having the United States. So if a Trump administration will withdraw support towards NATO, we will not be able to fulfill the enlargement for Ukraine, because we will not be able to uphold Article 42.7 in my analysis. And the overall challenge itself will, of course, be if we are not able to equip Ukraine to defend themselves. There is a real danger that there will be no Ukraine, and then, of course, there can also not be a European integration of Ukraine if the mafia regime in Moscow fully would occupy Ukraine. So to overall sum up, I think it's in our vital interest that we, on the one hand, build our defense capabilities, not to replace the US, because that's impossible, but to be a bit more autonomous with regards to this. And the second thing is that we also uphold the possibility for the Ukrainians to choose their own future and not be subjugated to a foreign aggressor that wants to eradicate a whole country. It's not the 19th or 20th century anymore. I thought we have overcome these imperialistic tendencies in Europe.
There have been discussions that even if the security of Ukraine can be provided and it becomes a member of the European Union, that would also mean huge change in balances in the European Union, economic and political, with move of the political power towards the east, and on the other hand, a lot of funds which now benefit the countries in the eastern part of the Europe may be directed towards Ukraine, given its huge size. How is Austria viewing these things? Because Austria has the capacity to be seen as Western, but it also has these strong ties to the East.
Yeah.
So what is the Austrian view or interest in this regard?
Well, I don't think that there is one Austrian view. I think there are many different views on this, but I can share my view on this with you, which is that if you remember, maybe back in 2004, before the Big Bang enlargement, there was this fear of the Polish plumber. Was coming out of France. Yeah? That if they get access to the single market, all the Polish plumbers will come and then drive the French out of business. I mean, I don't know if you have recently needed a plumber, but in Austria and in Germany, it's quite hard to get an appointment. Yeah? So I don't think that there's the Polish plumbers that drove them out of business. What I'm saying with this is I have a little bit the feeling that with every enlargement round, there's this fears coming up. And we need to address these fears and need to talk about them. Yeah? But the Ukrainian grain is maybe the Polish plumber of 2024. And I think that we need to put things into perspective. If we would give access to the 9 candidate countries without Turkey. Turkey is, for various reasons at the moment, not a prospective member of the European Union. But if we take these 9 countries, Western Balkans 6, and Moldova, Ukraine, Georgia, the overall population of these 9 countries is 67 million. The United Kingdom also has around 67 million inhabitants. What I'm trying to say with this is we already had such a populous European Union. Of course, these are 9 countries instead of 1. This is why I'm saying we need a reform of the decision-making process. So we have more qualified majority. Then that would alleviate the situation, because if we have 9 more potentially vetoing countries, of course that makes it more or less impossible. And the third thing is, of course you cannot compare the economy of these 9 countries to the United Kingdom. But what I've said before, economically, we've always benefited from enlargement, from having access to new markets. And if you look, for instance, at numbers, Germany pays twice as much into the EU budget than France. But at the same time, according to a study from 2018 from an Austrian Economic Research Institute, the WIFO, Germany benefits twice as much from single market integration than France. And so when we do a calculation of, I think net beneficiary and net payer is wrongly calculated, because it's not the net that we calculate, because the net would be that we calculate, okay, we pay this much into the budget, but we also benefit through other things, single market integration, but also exchange, 10 technology transfer, etc., etc. And this calculation is wrong, because we only look at probably the money we put in, but it's clear that not everybody can get more out of something that you jointly have put money in. So ultimately, we should much more look at it not as something you pay into, but rather something that is maybe a membership fee. Yeah? You get access to the single market, and that access you get through paying into the EU budget, into the common budget, because you get additional benefits out of this. Of course, we will need to reform, for instance, the common agricultural policy, but well, maybe we should even reform the common agricultural policy if Ukraine joins or not, because this is a sector that has been heavily subsidized for 7 decades, and maybe it's time to rethink how we structure, for instance, certain areas anyways. And why not do that to enable the European Union to enlarge?
To continue the issue of eastern part of Europe and its geopolitics, recently the Three Seas initiatives took place in Vilnius, and the Three Seas initiative has been seen generally as a policy or initiative that encourages kind of self-determination of the eastern part of the European Union. Now, how is Austria relating to this desire of some countries in our region to have more maybe economic integration, but maybe also more regional cooperation and maybe self-determination in a way?
Well, Austria is part of the Three Seas initiative, so I think in the overall it's seen as a benefit. I also do not think that there's much opposition to having closer regional integration, because Austria sees itself traditionally as this bridge between East and West, and I think they're very comfortable in that position. And if there are stronger integration on the eastern part, it will also be beneficial, I believe, for Austria. I think overall it is also necessary that we not only maybe even physically move more institutions towards the center, because it's very west-leaning at the moment anyways, but also in our mind to shift further to the center of the continent, and see it more as central Europe, rather than still talking about Western and Eastern Europe with regards to the countries that for instance are participating in the Three Seas initiative. But I also have to say that I am quite skeptical towards ever new emerging minilateral formats. We've seen an increase of number in recent years. There have been these formats that were started in the 1990s, Weimar Triangle, Visegrad 4, etc. But we have also recently seen there's Slavkov, there's Central European 5, there's Three Seas initiative. And there's a lot of these initiatives coming out, these minilateral formats coming out. And I don't see a same increase in outputs. And so I would say coordinating in a smaller format may be beneficial for decision making on a European level, but we should use the format that is already existing, which is the European Union, and make more use of its benefits there.
Okay, let's end this interview with a view towards the forthcoming European elections, and again the issue of dynamic balance inside the EU. We expect a significant rise of sovereignist forces in the European Parliament and politics at national level. What would this rise of sovereignism change inside the EU?
Yeah, Well, it's certainly going to be an increase of I would say Eurosceptical and right-wing parties, which at the moment doesn't look. If you look at the sheer numbers, they will not probably not have a majority, but they will significantly increase, which then would also ultimately have to be seen how at the end the parties will form themselves in the different European fractions. There's a lot of movement that I see at the moment between the ECR and also the IND fraction in the parliament, and it's going to be interesting who joins where and how much can they actually also achieve as a result. And that then of course will change the power balance if there is the third biggest fraction coming from conservative, Eurosceptical up to right-wing, post-fascist even parties, which is a real possibility. What we've already seen in the last European parliamentary election, that the majority between the European People's Party and the Social Democrats is no longer there. So there is the need for a third party to create a majority in the parliament. In this period, it has been Renew, which will significantly lose seats, and it's going to be interesting to see how then majorities will be found in the European Parliament, especially also when it comes to the procedural positions up to, for instance, the President of the European Parliament, and how these type of things will turn out. So I'm afraid that there might be a possibility that the agenda can be shaped much more from these Eurosceptic parties, which would of course not bring more European integration, but rather more these Europe of nations or Europe of fatherlands. And therefore I'm still hoping that there will be a strong signal for more integrationist, positive European development in the next parliament, but the opinion polls don't give me much hope for that, unfortunately.
To what extent it is realistic or likely that European People's Party goes in some form of cooperation with this sovereignist tendency which you described with different labels?
I think it really depends on how much ultimately the outcome will be and how the majorities will have to be formed. And of course, there's also a type of negotiation deal then afterwards for who becomes the next commissioner, the president of the European Commission. But I mean, since there is no formal coalition agreement within the European Parliament, there will always be the situation that you need to find certain allies for certain policy areas that you want to implement, and here I see that of course there will be much more cooperation maybe between the EPP and the ECR, because they share certain ideas rather than there's a cooperation, for instance, with the Social Democratic bloc, the S&D bloc. It's going to be interesting to see how Renew positions itself in that gamble, so to say, and if there is then a possibility to create also a parliamentary majority, because then it would shift certain areas. For instance, I could see that there will be a significant watering down of the European Green Deal, because I think that would be a sharing policy area of these three fractions. But maybe there will also come other fields, really depending on how many people from certain parties will achieve an electoral victory and become a member of the European Parliament.